Morning, everybody. Professor Snart checking in here. It's Tuesday morning, so maybe good afternoon if you're watching it later in the day or a different day. So we're past our first due date for Unit 1, which was Monday, January 14th. And again, Unit 1, just a sort of introductions unit. You know, you're building your homepage, you're using the discussion board for the first time. And getting full credit is really a matter of, obviously just following directions, but there's really pretty limited components to that. For the homepage, you needed a picture, and I think almost everybody had one, so that was fine. And then the discussion board was your post, but also responses. So as long as you did all of that stuff, you probably got full credit for it. And even if you didn't, if you missed everything entirely, then obviously you didn't get any points. But if you just got partial credit, you probably missed all of like 5 or maybe 10 points total. So pretty minimal and not that big a deal, to be honest, but it does kind of clue you in to how important it is to just follow the basic directions, because often by just doing that, you can get full points for these smaller assignments that we're doing. So it's pretty easy points if you just get the work done on time and follow those basic directions. When it comes to the more formal writing we're doing, things are a little bit more complicated, but in some ways they're really not. It sometimes does just boil down to following the directions. Maybe they're just more directions. That's what's complicated about it. So anyway, we get into Unit 2, which is due, actually let me just go back to the due dates here, due this Thursday, January 17th. So we get a little bit more into the content of our course, although again it's very kind of introductory still, thinking in very broad terms. There's a little piece on plagiarism here. There's really not much to say. Everybody knows what plagiarism is. We spend tons of time in this course on citing sources, finding correct sources and citing them correctly. So, it's not like we don't use material from those sources, but we always cite it correctly. And obviously the difference between plagiarism and not is using sources correctly within our work, but also, citing them and having that work cited and all the, the machinery that goes around with that, rather than just cut and pasting from some source, not acknowledging it, stealing, basically. So a little, some plagiarism stuff, and then a very brief kind of quiz to go through. And then we get into some stuff from our textbook, reading in part of the intro, which is a fairly short piece of the book, but it's just this sort of question about, like, what is literature? So you'll notice that our composition class is based on reading and then writing about literature. So it's interesting to think early on, before we do any of the actual reading for the course, to think about, like, in very broad terms, what literature means. It's kind of a loaded term. It has a lot of probably positive and negative connotations, and we use it maybe too frequently without really thinking about all of the connotations that it brings to the table. So how do people feel about it? Is it an intimidating term? Is it does it have this implied value, like, oh, you read literature while other people just read books or something like that? And so that's really where we can begin to start our thinking about the study of literature. And so our class focuses on reading so-called literature, I mean, whatever that term's going to mean, but it still ends up being a writing class. So this is kind of thinking about the reading that we're going to be doing as opposed to the writing end of it. So again, basic discussion board here, posting your own stuff, but also getting into the reply mode as part of it. Pretty easy grading breakdown here. So again, a fairly light unit overall, short reading, not a whole ton of stuff to do. So the due date comes up quickly, but you should be able to take care of things without too much problem. Just looking a little bit ahead, which is something that's useful to do anyway, but especially in the 8-week format here. I would always encourage you to look ahead, even if you're not really getting into the material, and certainly not doing the work ahead of time necessarily, because often you can jump the gun and it causes more problems than it solves. But we do start to get into some units that are a little more in-depth, have a lot more of the content, the writing content for our course, and that sort of thing. So these first 2 units have been fairly quick due dates, but also fairly light in terms of the workload. So just be aware that the units do get a little more involved the further we get into the course. Nothing that is overwhelming, I don't think. It really is, designed to work in the 8-week format without losing any of the material that we would cover in a 16-week format. But things are just compressed or combined in different ways than might otherwise be the case. Okay, so as always, if you have questions about what's going on, either from Unit 1 now or looking ahead to Unit 2 or other kinds of general concerns, just be in touch with me and I will talk to everybody pretty soon.